My name's Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst at I4CP, and I have the pleasure of co-hosting many of these Thursday Next Practices weekly sessions. And this week I'm joined by my colleague, Lena Perez, membership director here at I4CP. Good morning, Lena.
Morning, Tom.
Good to have you with us. You'll be facilitating the conversation with our special guest, who we'll get to in just a moment. But a few other quick announcements and reminders. This is I4CP Next Practices Weekly. So you can see the upcoming dates, September 12th, 19th, and 26th. We'll be joined by outstanding guests from a range of organizations, Capitolis, Spire Global, and PwC. We also hold a major in-person conference every year in Scottsdale, Arizona. You see this year, it will once again be in March, but the first week of March. So hopefully that will interfere very little, if at all, with spring break or other activities you might have later that month. We have an outstanding lineup of speakers that's coming together. We'll be making some announcements on that in the coming weeks. We usually have a range of CEOs and former CEOs, chief people officers, other heads of functional areas of HR, as well as thought leaders, book authors, and more at this conference. One thing that makes it unique is we never have an expo. There's no trade show. There are no vendors at this conference. So it is just you. It is just HR leaders, HR professionals coming together, over 500 of you every year in March. You can see we've got a promotion going on. If you register by November 15th, you can save $300 on the registration. Lots of people are taking advantage of that, so we'd encourage you to do so. Zeta has helpfully put the link to the conference website over in the chat, so you can open that up and take a look, and we'd love to have you join us in March. The other thing I wanted to remind you, for the past couple of weeks, we've had one of our major studies. We do a range of different surveys at I4CP, some small pulse surveys, but we also do 4 to 5 major studies every year, and this is one of those. Is your workforce ready to leverage AI? We're also calling this Workforce Readiness in the Era of AI. We would love all the companies represented on the call today to participate in this survey. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes. We ask questions around things like upskilling in the age of AI, how much is your company already using AI, things like internal mobility, skills-based practices, and so on. In some ways, it's going to give us updated data from 2 previous surveys, one that we did in 2021 and one that we did just last summer. So it's going to be a great set of data. But it won't be as good as it could be if we don't get participation from all of your organizations. So please use the link that, again, Zeta has put over in the chat, because we'd love to have you represented in this research. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Lena, who's going to lead the conversation with our special guest today.
Thank you, Tom. I am so thrilled to be here, but I'm even more excited for our conversation with Jennifer today. We have some fascinating insights to share, so let's dive right in and get started. Jennifer, welcome to today's Next Weekly Practice Call. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Great to be here, and great to see so many folks on the line from all across the globe. And I see a number of my Dow colleagues are on as well, so happy to have them as well.
Thank you. So Jennifer, we have met a few times now, so I'm very familiar with you and your amazing career, but why don't we share with the audience a little bit about you and the impressive 24-year career that you have built at Dow, starting from a specialized role in employee service to becoming the global HR director of talent.
Yep, great. Thank you. Sometimes I don't know where the 24 years went because it all goes fast. But yeah, so I actually came to Dow with a more specialized background. I have a PhD in industrial organizational psychology. When I came out of graduate school and some of my first roles, I was thinking about how specialized do I want to be versus how broad do I want to be? And quite honestly, I didn't know at the time. So I joined Dow for a few reasons. One, at the time, for the time period, they were already operating in a very global mindset related to HR, as opposed to a real regional structure that you often saw back in the early 2000s. And my first role was really focused, linked to my education with our employee engagement program, other data and research-driven processes like HR benchmarking, client satisfaction, leadership effectiveness assessments, things like that. Over time, I broadened my experiences. I've stepped out of more specialist roles and done what I would call an HR partner or HR generalist role at some of our sites in the Dow world. And, then I've come back into more specialist roles from that, right? So talent acquisition, talent management, I&D, et cetera. I would say that the more generalist roles and working as an HR business partner are maybe sometimes not where my personal passion lies. However, they're the ones that I've learned the most from, because perhaps they're the most different than my educational background, and they've been the roles that have helped me really learn about the business that Dow runs and how we operate and what, really the internal client needs are. But overall, I've spent the most time in talent acquisition and talent management in various roles, and now kind of culminating into a role where I'm leading across both sides of things. And I'll talk in a minute about our HR structure, but I lead our centers of expertise around talent, which is talent acquisition through talent management and learning. And, some of the career highlights along the way, I've had several opportunities to get involved in merger and acquisition work, divestiture work at a large scale, and more recently related to our HR transformation. We had a large scale program that was several years long that involved implementing Workday on a global scale. It involved adjusting and redesigning job architecture, which has now kind of come into play as we are on our skills journey. So I can talk about some of the linkages there, and also implemented a new organization design. So a lot of that has now set up where we're headed, and some of the next phases for Dow.
Wow, that's a very interesting journey. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
But I think it gets a little bit more interesting. You have had the opportunity to work both in the US and abroad, particularly as an HR director in Europe. For more than 2 years, I believe, you led talent management for Switzerland, Central Europe, Greater Russia, and EMEA. What brought that about, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, amazing experience. Always recommend, if it works into your life and career plans, to take a job outside of your country, your home country. For me, that was something I was always interested in. I mentioned one of the reasons I came to Dow was their very global mindset with how they approached programs and practices. And from a HR colleague perspective, one of the things that I enjoyed the most was always working with people from different places and different backgrounds. So this was one of those opportunities that was a bit of the right time for me to be making a move. At the time, before I took the role, I was focused on our global talent acquisition programs and strategies, and I was looking to get a bit more experience on the talent management side and the breadth of programs there for development, leadership development, employee development, and learning. And then also, as I progressed on my leadership journey, needing and wanting to maybe fill some more of my own experience gaps with HR delivery and running the business of HR. So it was a unique role that happened to come available at a good time for me. My leaders had known that I was interested and willing to take an assignment outside the US. So, that opportunity came about, and really, helped bring to life, while I had worked with people from different backgrounds and cultures for many years, had never lived abroad. And it was a huge stretch, right? It was a huge stretch for me to, think about how HR works in different countries, all the way down to the level of, payroll and hiring and operations, but also from the talent management perspective, where that was a more, I'd say, global approach. But even with that, I found for sure there were distinct needs, cultural differences, and, several cases where I really had to challenge my own mindset and realize that I had some perceptions and probably unconscious biases about Europe as a concept, right? We know that's many, many different countries that comprise Europe. And then I also had connections to the Middle East as well. So understanding all those different cultures and backgrounds, and really, embracing the learning part of it, and knowing that I was not going to be the expert, especially when it came to the country level operations. So it's another, I'd say, leadership lesson in having a great team that you can trust and support to have all of those details. And just from a personal perspective, it was a great opportunity to get to travel within Europe quite easily. My colleagues always kidded me that I would take a quick weekend trip to another country, which is probably a very US thing to go do that in 2 days. For them, it's not really a holiday unless it's a week or two long. But I was trying to maximize opportunities, and had my young kids and my husband there with me as well. And one of the first big lessons was, live like a local, don't live like a tourist. It's much more expensive to live like a tourist than a local, and you don't really get the real feel of it all.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I think even when you're on vacation, you should try to experience it as a local. I think it's the best way to learn and get to know any new place. So now let's talk a little bit about Dow. Dow operates in a unique space of B2B company impacting various industry globally. Can you tell us a little bit about Dow for those that are not too familiar with Dow?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. And some may say, oh, it's a fairly commonly known company. Maybe others say, no idea who you are. We're about 36,000 employees, 45 billion in sales last year, operate in 31 countries. But essentially, we are a solutions and material science company where we bring that material science expertise to create innovation and deliver on a sustainable future. So as Lena just mentioned, we are mostly B2B. So you won't see much of any Dow branded products out on the market, because what we make goes into other companies' products. But I can pretty much guarantee you that unless you're living off the grid completely on a day-to-day basis, which I don't think you are because you're here on this call, you're likely touching some Dow product every day. And so some examples of our products and our markets include packaging. So materials that are used to keep food fresh longer. Reduced food waste is a big thing there, as well as durable packaging. Infrastructure, building, construction, energy efficiency, durability and construction, adhesives, lubricants, wires, cables, those all have Dow products going in them. From the consumer side, things like materials, you see the bedding here, flooring, all these different applications. And then mobility is maybe one that is not as traditionally thought about with Dow, but materials that are going into transportation, cars, making them lighter weight, making them safer. And all of these things, of course, we're driving towards reducing the negative impacts on the environment and really building a more sustainable future. And I was going to talk a little bit too about Dow's culture, our ambition. So, if you ask any employee, they will likely kind of come at you with our ambition, which really focuses around us, our innovation, our customer centricity, our inclusivity, and sustainability. So I've probably already in some way in my first, 5 minutes mentioned a few of these points. But our ambition is to really be that leader and being the most innovative, customer-centric, inclusive, and sustainable. And all of that is really laid on a foundation of our core values, with core values being our respect for people, and that's people, both employees, but also clients, customers, and how we connect and interact and impact them. Integrity, so having the highest ethical standards on a global scale. And protecting the planet, which is not just about the planet per se, but that also involves protecting our people, and safety is a huge focus of ours and really one of our core mindsets and values there.
Great, thank you for that. Very insightful background on your culture and on Dow. So, from our conversations, Jennifer, I have learned Dow's HR structure is quite comprehensive, and I'm sure the audience would like to learn more a little bit about it. Could you share how is your HR organization structure?
Sure. Yeah. So our HR structure, I mentioned a few years ago, we went through some changes, and this the result of that is this model with three significant parts, which on the one hand maybe isn't that different from what some organizations are doing, but I will point out some things that might be a bit more unique. So I guess because I sit here, I'll start with the centers of expertise. And that's where we have, it's actually designed to be quite a small group of people that are experts connecting us to the leading practices, to the business priorities, developing those global scale HR programs, philosophies, program designs, and also being internal consultants. Now, we work in heavy partnership across our HR model, but particularly with what you see on the left here, the HR Solutions Organization. So the Solutions Organization is the team that we work closely with on a daily basis to really bring it to life, bring whatever program, whatever approach, bring it to life with tools, technology, delivery at scale, delivery out in the regions. And so that group also cuts across all the different discipline areas of HR to deliver on all of those programs and policies. And then the partner organization is probably, commonly referred to as like HR business partner. We do have these types of roles at a site level, so like a large site level, and many of them are also aligned to a business or a function, and they're of course utilizing and bringing all of the tools and solutions globally to to the organization, and then feeding back, of course, the needs out there in the organization. What are the needs? What are the people agendas that are happening? And connecting us back through the HR Center of Expertise for maybe some future upgrade or change or new approach or program. And I think I already mentioned that within the centers of expertise, my role covers the talent side of things, and then our other big center of expertise is focused on total rewards, so compensation, benefits, internal mobility is the other big centers of expertise.
I appreciate that, Jennifer. I work very closely with our Chief Learning and Talent Officer Board, which is comprised of about maybe 1/3 Chief Learning Officers and then 2/3 are Chief Talent Officers.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a wide range of what is encompassed by being a head of talent at large organizations such as your own. So my understanding is you lead talent acquisition and talent development and workforce insights. And as you said, total rewards is a separate area. So would that include then things like succession planning, performance management as part of sort of talent development?
Correct. Yep. Succession, talent development, leadership development. And also I've got the, back to my roots, I've also got some of the connections to, on the insights part, the engagement programs as well. So our employee engagement, our assessments, leadership, assessments and such. And then maybe, Tom, a bit unique back to your point about learning. I do also have learning in scope of my role. I will say that we have centralized learning management and some centralized broad-based, employee and leadership development programs. However, there is a lot of learning that is dispersed that's happening out in the organization through what we call functional or kind of disciplined aligned functional leads like finance or R&D or IT. They've typically all got learning leaders that are driving the learning agendas in their organizations, but they all connect back to what we have as a global learning council that comes together regularly to talk about the shared agenda related to learning. And HR does have oversight of our global LMS approach as well.
Yeah, and that again, that's a common approach, sometimes referred to as federated or hybrid approach to centralizing aspects of learning and development. But like you said, functional learning often residing out in the various businesses or regions of the organization. So thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, sure.
Lena, I think you're muted.
I am, sorry. Thank you for that comprehensive overview, both, and for pitching in, Tom. So Jennifer, we understand from the conversation we have had so far, Dow's structures is designed to strategically align with the company's global goals while ensuring efficiency and expertise across areas. So speaking of strategy, as the director of talent, and you mentioned you oversee critical areas like talent management, talent acquisition, and learning. Can you share some of the key priorities you're focusing on these disciplines?
Sure, yes. I'd say our biggest broad-based focused effort right now is around modernizing workforce capabilities, particularly with a skills focus. So you can see the phrase here, that to enable our ambition. So linking back to that ambition I talked about, that we're cultivating and building this skills valued and continuous learning culture to make sure our workforce is ready to deliver today and tomorrow, with this visual here, skills as really that red thread connecting people to jobs, to career growth, and to growth at Dow. Probably not unlike many companies, people come to Dow for great opportunities, but when they do leave, sometimes it's also for a great opportunity, right? So the more we can grow and develop people and show them that link across their career, the better. In the past, we had a competency-based approach with 4 very, I'd say, high-level competencies that didn't really drill down into the job-specific skills. And I know that it feels like every company is going through a skills journey like something like this now. So as we talk through the next couple of slides, I'll try to maybe highlight what possibly is a bit unique for how we're pursuing on our skills journey at Dow. So, this is our overarching vision here, right? Is building the skills valued and continuous learning culture that results in a more engaged, agile, and future-ready workforce. 1 or 2 points I want to make here before we get into a little bit even more detail is, when we started this journey, you see the focus here on continuous learning, but also the comment about skills valued. What does that mean, skills valued? So I'd say pretty quickly as we were on this journey, and this journey has been already for the past few years. So we're a few years into this journey, and it has taken us significant time, I'd say, to work across the HR organization to build that connection and that understanding of how skills cuts across our HR programs and processes. Because like I said, we did start this with a focus on we're going to go improve learning, and we're going to go improve the link between skills needed today and in the future and learning opportunities. And that's still a significant part of it. However, pretty quickly, we realized it was a whole lot more than that. I mentioned earlier about our work several years ago to update our job architecture. That updating of job architecture actually was one of the enablers to doing this work now, because we went from multiple thousands of job titles that were not real concise and not real connected to, I think only, and I'm going to get the number wrong, but somewhere in the 1,200, 1,300 range of job titles. And so even having that work done helped us be able to now start to map skills to those roles. And that's the work we've been doing the past year. A part of this project is first, we created a skills and competency updated framework that is unique to Dow. We did work with, have worked with an external partner on that, worked with Aon early on to really frame out and scope the high level approach, and then how far we would drill down with the use of skills. I think I already mentioned that we're a Workday user. I'm sure many of the others on the phone are as well, and know that they have a skills cloud in Workday. We turned on use of Workday in late 2020, late 2019. Sorry, I get confused with the COVID years there. So late 2019. So we're several years into that, but we had never truly fully, I'd say, embraced or communicated with the organization before this work about the use of the skills cloud. So it just kind of organically, people were using it or not using it or whatnot. We decided that, based on just our culture and the fact that we do well with having some, I'd say, approaches and frameworks, we did decide to put, like I said, in place a Dow specific framework that does eventually link back to how people can put in skills in Workday on their talent profile, but that has that framework and has that structure. And I can talk a little bit more about that. I think my next slide drills into that by way of example. If we can go to the next slide. Yes. So here's an example of we have at the high level, we have defined an updated 6 enterprise competencies. What's different than the past, one is that we've updated these for, some things that are more, modern times than what we had, 10 years ago. But I'd say what's significantly different is now we drill down a clear structured approach all the way down to about 3,500 job specific skills. So across those, approximately 1,000 plus jobs at Dow, the 3,500 job specific skills, we're using the same terminology and the same, structured approach to reviewing the roles and defining the skills, putting those on the job profiles in Workday, which then lets us start to connect that in also with hiring discussions, development discussions, et cetera. So this is an example of agile organization is that top level enterprise competency that we would expect every employee at the company to have something related in agile organization in their role. But when you get all the way drilled down to, we've got the skills categories, and we've got the job specific skills. So the job specific skills is really where probably the employee cares the most, right? The rest of this sometimes is a little bit of, well, this is helpful for us in HR, or maybe helpful for leaders to talk about development more broadly. But the job specific skills are where they really want to know, okay, what exactly do I need to be doing in my job? What do I need to be great at? And what this is allowing us as well is with job profiles being, so the generic job profiles being available for employees or leaders to look at, they can start to see, okay, if I'm in this role over here now, but I want that role over there in 2 years or 3 years, what skill gaps might I have? And we're using the same the same skills terminology across the jobs now that we weren't in the past. So in the past, it might have been digital, digital literacy, or, data mindset, or, use of analytics, all the different terms when really we meant the same thing. So that was a huge for us. And I will admit, it took a lot of time to get clarity on the skills framework, to get alignment from, senior leadership. And we worked with across the company to make sure that this framework was representing everything we've got going on now and in the upcoming future. So that took significant time. Other companies have decided to really just leverage the skills framework and let it happen organically. For us, that just wasn't the preferred approach. So it's taken longer, but now we're in the year where we're really activating it and able to move more quickly. The other caution I would say here is that for companies that implement maybe a talent marketplace on top of their LMS or on top of Workday or a system like that, you could quickly end up with different skills, terminology, and frameworks in every system. And that was something that we also wanted to really avoid. We wanted to have one place that, at least as a starting point, that employees knew this is where the skills exist on my profile, and here's where I can input my own skills. And so we haven't added on a bunch of other connection points yet. That's part of our longer range journey.
I love that point, Jennifer. That came up early on in my research in this area, which I've done quite a bit of, going back to 2021. When we did our workforce readiness study, and I created some guidebooks on how to create a skills database and talent mobility and internal talent marketplaces. And many of the organizations and leaders that I talked with said exactly that the different platforms, many of them, whether it's the LMS, the LXP, the HRIS, the talent marketplace, they'll come with their own skills taxonomy. And of course, as a vendor, they'd love it if you use theirs. So you end up needing to pick what one you're going to go with, or create one of your own, maybe with outside consultants, as sounds like you worked with Aon early on, and then just have translation layers that can talk between the systems behind the scenes, so that the end user, your employees, as well as all HR people across all your centers of excellence, are speaking the same language, and they're not having one skills group over here and another over there. So I appreciate that tip. Willis in the chat also just asked in general for him and others on the call who use Workday, which is a lot of organizations these days. Do you have any other learnings from when you first rolled it out in 2019 till now? Things that you can think of that were critical from Skills Cloud and Talent Marketplace in particular?
I mean, I'll be transparent with this group that, right, the Workday Skills Cloud just, it wasn't, we didn't know much about it when we first implemented. You know, like I said, we kind of turned it on and it was like, okay, that's interesting, but it wasn't really utilized. So, you know, I'd say advice there is to just, if you're starting on this journey, or if you're changing or going to a new system that has a skills component, take the time to understand how it cuts across and connects across the different areas of HR. As I've mentioned, we started this with a development focus, and I've also mentioned that my role doesn't directly have, you know, accountability, of course, for compensation, total rewards, that whole space, but there's links to skills across all areas of HR. And so understanding those links, because even some of my team on the phone will be smiling, right? Even today, as we start to use new features, other things are popping up in the system that we're like, oh, I didn't know it was connected there, or I didn't know this was going to show up over here. So taking the time to really understand that. And then I think the other one I already mentioned is if you're using multiple systems that have skills capabilities, take a decision on which is the one, right? Are you going to use one of them? And does it matter to you to have a consistent terminology or not? Now, we at this moment can't fully, quote, turn off the Workday Skills Cloud or terminology, but what we have done is build in our terminology and loaded that into Workday so that when a user starts to type something in, ours come up first, hopefully, is at least what it's designed to do. And only if our terminology or our skills aren't meeting the need, then something else, you know, can be added through the Skills Cloud. But it's not perfect at all, and it's going to be, you know, a little bit messy and bumpy as we go. But we're playing, you know, what I'd say is we're playing the long game here, right? Our last competency model was in place about 15 years. So and maybe that's another good point, is we're expecting that top layer of the 6, and Agile is one example of the 6, we're expecting that is going to be very consistent over the coming, you know, 10 plus years. The job specific skills, when you get right down into maybe a coding language, right, or a specific technology, that will change more frequently. So part of our ongoing governance approach is to look at that on a regular basis, like at least yearly, almost like you do market measurement for compensation. We'll have a process like that for the skills to say, is there something new that needs to come in, and maybe something else goes out, and that's where we can be more agile. And maybe my last point on why it was so, I think, important and foundational for us to use a consistent framework and to use a common language was that we really, we have a huge culture of internal movement at Dow and moving people around. But it was always very difficult to know, okay, I have these HR skill sets. Maybe I work in HR and I do data and analytics work in HR. But there's data and analytics skill sets that are highly transferable to other parts of the organization. That whole transferable skill set mindset, this enables that much more than we had in the past, because in the past, like I said, we were using different terminology everywhere. Now we can use the same terminology and say, oh, I have a skill set overlap with this other role in this other completely different part of the organization. Maybe it's manufacturing, maybe it's, you know, IT, R&D, but you can see that skill set overlap. And that's what within Workday, the Career Hub that we've recently turned on is starting to help employees make those connections across the organization, not just in their direct, you know, line of sight.
Thank you, Jennifer. That is very impressive. And it's so inspired to hear how Dow is embracing the skill-based approach to drive agility and the future readiness.
Yeah.
You know, the vision you have outlined, it truly reflects a forward-thinking strategy that not only modernizes workforce capabilities, but also taps into a broader talent pool. So now bringing this concept to life, can you share what this shift means in practice at Dow?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, I can obviously talk, I think, all day about this, but I'll try to highlight a few points, and then We'll drill into a couple of them in more detail, but at a high level, the skills really, and our model now is at the heart of across our people, practices, and processes. So not all of this is completely done yet, but this is all in progress and is, within our roadmap. So from a, foundational perspective, first things first, having the framework, having the skills of what they are, mapping those to all of our unique job profiles, right? So that's the work that's really close to completion now. We've got most of them already loaded in Workday. So for many jobs, they're already visible now, the specific skills there, and finishing that work up. But that is critical for understanding, like I mentioned, what's today existing in the organization, what skill sets or what skills are needed in the organization, and can start to help us think about where we might have gaps. From a hiring perspective, we are updating our interview content to have more focus on skills that are linked back to the job postings. And so updating the interview guides and the interview content that we're using there. And then recredentialing of targeted roles. And if you haven't heard this term, recredentialing, it's a concept that's that we've been looking at and starting to do for the last few years of helping to think about skills and experiences that meet the needs and requirements for a role, as opposed to always defaulting to maybe a 4-year degree requirement or a 2-year degree requirement. And there's specific roles that we have already done this and said, hey, there's some roles in our IT organization where it's very clear that you can build those skill sets without necessarily a 4-year degree or a bachelor's degree. So some of those roles we're enabling that instead of the degree, but having these skills and experiences. So we're also putting in place some guidance for how to work that through and how to really make some decisions on that when you're taking recredentialing. But the positive side of that, there's several positives, right? And the big one for us is expanding our talent pools. So we've got partnerships with external organizations. One of the big one in the US is 110. That's a coalition of top employers that we're working with on that recredentialing part of it. But also, and I can talk more about hiring in a moment, but from learning and development, clearly making that link between skills and development opportunities. So parallel to this journey, we've been implementing broader scale learning content platforms like Coursera. So that's something that's been ongoing and is now available to much of our population. And then the use of gigs or projects, both use of gigs and projects to help build skills, but also to maybe leverage unique skills that maybe a leader has a need for project-based and it's got a skill that they don't have in their team. So using gigs as an opportunity to bring folks in. And gigs have been happening for the past few years in some pockets of the organization. And we're seeing a lot of positives from employees on openness, so posting of the gigs, right? And it's not just, oh, I know this person over there that can do this. It's putting it out there to say, hey, we have an opportunity for a short, and for us, we define these as shorter term, not full-time, skills-focused project opportunities. So that's something that we've been testing out and getting a lot of positive feedback of that link to skills there. And then I've mentioned briefly the career navigation part. So for us as a Workday user, a lot of this is part of Career Hub concept there, where you've got machine learning happening with the skills, the profiles, the career mapping. Since we've only been a few years in our Workday journey, we don't have a ton of the career history. So this is, but it is improving over time. And then doing the mentor matching is also a great feature here that links back to the skills.
Jennifer, I want to jump in here because the chat is sort of blowing up a bit, as I expected it would, in a good way. People really enjoying this conversation and everything you're sharing about this journey, particularly because you've been on this journey, even though it sort of started maybe slow and organically back in 2019, but it's obviously ramped up in recent years. So I think folks are resonating a lot and learning a lot from what you're sharing. I do want to share, for those on the call that are I4CP members, I saw the question or suggestion rather from Krista about getting together with others to share about Workday, Talent Marketplace, pros and cons, what you're doing. Several have sort of chimed in with that. We have been on top of this issue. As I said earlier, our workforce readiness study, the guidebooks are created for a number of years, and we've hosted a number of member flash calls. We've had folks from Vertex Pharmaceuticals, Ecolab, Target, and others share what they're doing in this area of sort of skills-based organization, making them pivot in that direction, the pros and cons, what to watch out for, lessons learned. Those are all recorded flash calls and are available on our website for members. So for those of you that are either new members or have been on the journey for a while with us, I'd encourage you to search around the I4CP website, find those to learn more from other peers like Jennifer. We also have exchange groups, which those calls are not recorded, but we usually provide ample notes. So members have access to those. And some of the exchanges like the Workforce Planning Exchange have held numerous meetings on this sort of conglomeration of topics, if you will, over the past couple of years. So wanted to share that for those of you that are I4CP members. I wanted to also just ask one question. One thing I'm not seeing here, Jennifer, is specific focus on your performance management process. To what extent have you integrated skills? So when a manager has their one-on-one, whether it's once a year, twice a year, more frequently, are they talking specifically at the skill level with their employees?
Great question. So our initial rollout has been focused on development conversations around skills and not on performance management with skills. However, starting next year, that will be more baked into performance management. So this year was really the year of getting people familiar with the framework. What do we mean by skills? Where do you find that information? But do have discussions with your leader about your current perceptions of your skills and maybe some gaps. And then as we've got everything loaded, into the job profiles, then 2025 and cycle of performance and beyond will be the time where we more formally start to connect that. But it was a purposeful decision on two parts, a purposeful decision to focus primarily now and in the past year on use of skills to support development, so that it didn't feel like we were coming in here to rate everybody and maybe make some decisions on jobs or fit with jobs, because that was not at all the intent of this approach, right? The intent of this approach was really the development angle and the leverage of talent across the organization with transferable skills. So both from that and from a compensation standpoint, we haven't, that's not actively happening, right? Connections directly to compensation either. But yeah, starting those discussions.
Perfect. That was another question that just came in from Tabitha, so appreciate that.
Yeah, we're not, and that's purposeful right now.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can just say a couple of words about, I threw this slide in a little bit, at the last minute, just thinking about this audience. I'm not going to read this through to you, but I wanted to use this slide as a representation of, over time, how we've had to really structure the work around all of this because it got so big. And I know I've got some of my team members on the phone, so shout out to our program team and leaders that have been really on this journey with us. And so each of these, I'd say, pillars or tracks has, a number of, has like a track leader and focus connections with our HRIT organization on how we enable the technology. So I would just suggest, if you're on one of these journeys, to really think about the big tracks of work all the way from the foundations of the data and the strategy. That's the one that probably took us the longest time, right, to get alignment and agreement on how we're doing that. And then that kind of flows into everything else from there, from the hiring to the learning to the career navigation and eventually to the performance conversations too.
Yeah, I appreciate this level of detail. It gets to some of the, folks in the chat talking about what are the pros and cons. And Nicole asked earlier, what have you actually seen? You list here the benefits that you were hoping for. Do you have any numbers? Have you seen an increase in internal mobility and improvement in retention, attrition numbers?
Well, interestingly, internal mobility is actually quite high at Dow. We do most of our movement from within as opposed to external hiring, except for entry-level programs. So we wouldn't actually expect to see much change there, but I'd say what it does drive is more clarity or more visibility to skill adjacent, skill transferable skill opportunities. But yeah, it's actually still too soon to even give some specific numbers there, because we've just this calendar year rolled out the framework, and we're early in our change journey. So hopefully I can maybe come back next year and answer that question a little bit more. What we are also monitoring, though, of course, are things like our employee engagement survey, and if we're seeing any increases on is my job making good use of my skills and abilities? Do I have opportunities in Dow to grow and learn and develop? And we've got another upcoming checkpoint on that in September. Well, this month, actually, it's September. This month, we'll get some data on that.
Right. Oh my God, this is so amazing. I know everybody's really enjoying this presentation, Jennifer. So thank you for all the great insights. So it is so impressive to see how that is integrating these skills into every aspect of talent management. What would you say is the overall value of this cultural shift towards skill-based organization?
Yeah. It's kind of back to some of the things I've said around clarity and transparency of what skills are needed for certain roles. And so the ability, like I said, for an employee to go look and see, hey, these are the skills attached to my role at a more detailed level. They're not at the high level that like they were in the past, where it was a competency like communication. That's not really that helpful, right? Like, what is it about that? Or even, data analytic mindset. Okay, well, what does that mean? Like, let's get down to what is really needed for this role. So that is super helpful. But a lot of the other, I'd say, but key benefits of how we can now link learning curriculum to this and reduce duplication. So this is another one that probably matters more to me as an HR professional and as a leader here, of we maybe had 10 different curriculums around data and analytics in the past, but nobody really knew because we weren't using the same terminology. Back to that concept of that Global Learning Council that I mentioned, we expect that Global Learning Council to be talking about not just their discipline, like functional driving to their own teams, but anything that they're creating content on that's relevant to the whole enterprise, to talk about those, and then eliminate projects that are duplicating and have like common curriculum that can be leveraged. So that's already been another positive advantage. And then, of course, to be able to eventually see where the gap and the opportunity areas to develop, content for the future as well.
Thank you. So building a little bit on this, how does this move on skills-based is hiring further and contribute to diversity and inclusion within the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say both this work as well as just our overall approaches around inclusive hiring that we've had for the last several years have been really foundational for us in a lot of ways. So it was about 5 years ago, we implemented what we called inclusive hiring standards to make sure that we were using diverse interview panels and that we had diverse candidate pools. And so now that's an expectation as we're posting roles, and there's standards around that. We have very specific guidelines in place, like well, first of all, that a job should be posted internally, that we've moved away from the tapping someone on the shoulder and just moving them into the job, right? So transparency that jobs are posted and visible, and that when those are posted, that there's at least there's multiple genders, more than one gender on the interview panel, and in the US more than one race or ethnicity on the interview panel, and then similarly with the candidate slate. Now, of course, we don't share the candidate slate details, the demographic details with a hiring manager. The recruiter is looking at a summary level to make sure that diversity exists. But that's been, I'd say, a foundational part of how we've also started to broaden and get more diverse candidate pools, and then revert back when we don't have that. And we built this into our hiring process where a leader has to confirm, yes, I have a diverse interview panel, right? And here they are. And I've talked to my recruiter about the candidate slate, and if it's not diverse, I need to go back and we need to do some more sourcing, or, yes, there's always an exception process, but we try to use that minimally. But as we really have that embedded, the skills part of it brings a whole other angle to, I'd say, the structure of the interviews, the content that we're doing, and making that, link back to this broader skills journey as well.
Great. I think you might have answered a little bit, but
Yeah.
given these advancements, how is this shift toward inclusive hiring impacting your overall hiring process?
Yep. So, I mentioned that we've got a clear guidance on needing a diverse interview panel. We're a company we're a manufacturing company. Half of our employees are operational employees, with, the majority of those working in plants often on 24/7 rotations or shift schedules. So, historically, we've had a challenge, particularly with female diversity in those types of roles. So we've seen a good, I'd say, step progress over the years of improving in our female diversity. We've also had to build up, particularly in the US, around ethnic minority talent, building up strong partnerships with universities, historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutes, all of those things. But I'd say the other angle of this is just, how we're supporting the work to do that. When you maybe don't have a huge amount of diversity in your leader population or in your total company, then back to the point about the interview panels and how do we get a diverse interview panel, we don't want to be using the same, leader for every single interview that's sitting in, right? And so I think one of the great features that we've really built up over the years is that connection with our employee resource groups.
Mm-hmm.
And using those employee resource groups, and we have a slide here. I'm sure many folks on the phone have these resource groups, but one of the big evolutions for us the past several years with these has been getting them very well connected with some of our company people, processes, and practices, right? So now folks that are participating in these groups can raise their hand and get on a list, essentially, of folks that are willing to participate in interviews and support that diverse hiring practices. And then, of course, there's also many other ways that these ERGs are getting involved in the way we do work. So that can be from hosting and owning sponsorship programs and mentorship programs. So I'd say each of these networks, and for the majority, these are global networks. VetNet, by nature of veterans, is more of a US one, but the majority of these networks are global in nature, and often get involved in supporting, like I said, mentorship, sponsorship programs in partnership with HR, hiring activities when we're out and about at various university interactions as well. We leverage this as a very powerful group, and maybe just one fun fact I'll slip in here, because I also have that link to our employee engagement work, is employees that are involved in ERGs at Dow are usually between like 8 and 10 points higher on their satisfaction and engagement levels. Now, I know I have the stats background. I know we're not saying it's causing that. Correlation is not causation, but it's a great link, right? And it's a great group and supportive folks that come together for common causes, and that's been super powerful for us.
Yeah, and I would say if you see that correlation year after year, that difference, then I would say it leans into being more causative. And also nice to see the number 7 ranking on the Diversity Inc. now FAIR 360.
Yes.
So congratulations on that ranking as well.
Yes.
Yeah, well, Jennifer, time went by so fast, and this was such an amazing conversation. I want to be mindful of the time that we have remaining. So I want to thank you for sharing your valuable insight with us today. Your leadership and the innovative HR practices at Dow, from building the skill-based culture to enhancing diversity through inclusive hiring, are truly inspiring. It is clear that the approach you're doing at Dow is shaping the future of HR and setting a powerful example for organizations striving for agility, inclusivity, and growth. So we really appreciate your time and your thoughtful contributions to the discussion today. I'm sure our audience gains tremendous value for it. So thank you again.
Sure. No, it's been great and the time flew by. I know I can even see in the chat, there's probably some things that we didn't get to. So I'm happy as well to connect afterwards, directly, with individuals, or if there's any follow-up information I can provide, I'm happy to do that and learn from others, right? We have talked to a lot of companies that have been on similar journeys, but everyone is doing it in a different way. There is no exact blueprint that we have found that works. So we're trying to learn from everyone as well.
Thank you for that offer. I'm sure a lot of them will jump into that. And with that, I pass it back to you, Tom. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lena, for leading the conversation today, and thank you as well, Jennifer. Great insights, great sharing. The chat was very active, so people got a lot out of it. I want to note for folks too, we encourage you to connect with Jennifer on LinkedIn. If you had a couple of questions maybe that weren't answered, I'm sure she would be willing to give you a one-on-one answer if you could connect with her there. Zeta put the link to Jennifer's LinkedIn profile a couple of times over in the chat. Just to close things out, all of our Next Practices weekly sessions each week are available for recertification credit hours with both HRCI and SHRM. So just jot down the program ID or activity ID that's relevant for you if you have one of those HR certifications. They're on the screen here and they're also over in the chat. So once again, thank you, Lena. Great work today. Thank you, Jennifer, for all that you share. Thank you, Zeta, for all of your support. And we'll see everyone again next week on another Thursday I4CP Next Practices Weekly. Until then, have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.